Back to the exempt list. Today, we are talking about all things NFC Championship and AFC Championship related. I have my good friend Bryce Rossler from Sports Info Solutions, noted big-time Detroit Lions homer, to break it all down, and we're going to get right into it. Welcome back to the exempt list, part of the Zero Blitz family, presented by Prime. I have my friend, Sports Info Solution, know-it-all, ball knower, Bryce Rossler on the podcast to join us to talk all championship Sunday. And we're going to talk a little bit more about some of these head coaching hires down the pipeline. First of all, Bryce, how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right.
Dog's wearing you out?
Yeah, I got to sleep 8 hours last night. I can't.
8 hours is good.
8 hours is great, especially when you have a puppy that likes to wake you up at 8 a.m. every morning.
That's a beast. That's no puppy. For those of you who don't know, Bryce has a gigantic dog who's like, how old is Freya now?
She's coming up on a year. She'll be a year in February.
So you're almost going to get to the part where the dog calms down and starts to become like a real dog, right?
We're going to get to the part where the dog calms down here in about 15 minutes when her trazodone kicks in. You think I'm kidding?
I know. I don't think you're kidding. Before we get into this, do you want to just explain real quick what your job is for Sports Info Solutions?
Yeah, so I am an R&D analyst for Sports Info Solutions. We do multiple sports. We do baseball, basketball, and football. I work exclusively on the football side. We are a proprietary data charter for these sports, so we have our own in-house charting department that collects data on all of the NFL and FBS games. I work on both NFL and NCAA stuff. I don't do any of the collection. I work with analyzing the data that we have, creating various a la carte reports for team and media clients, as well as supporting some of the back end of our football data tools like our data hub, our tendency reports app, things like that. So lots of nerdy stuff. You probably wouldn't understand it, Chuck.
No,
it's all above your head.
Yeah.
I'm better than you.
I'm just a big idiot, you know. I think Bryce is one of my favorite people to talk football to because he gets really in the weeds and very passionate about the game and talking about it in certain ways. So no better person to bring on to talk about the games we just saw this past weekend that have launched us into a Chiefs and 49ers Super Bowl, which we'll talk more about next week when we are in Las Vegas. But now's a good time to just kind of go back over the games and just try and figure out what happened. So we'll start off with Chiefs-Ravens. Chiefs won 17-10 in a game where the Ravens offense just, I don't know, like I guess being choked out into submission is kind of the best way to put it, although I found their game plan pretty puzzling. But let's just start with a hot button topic that everyone is going to slam over the next few days. Lamar Jackson, he's on pace to win his second MVP next week at the NFL Honor Show. Would put him in pretty rare air as far as just players to do that in general. He'll be the 11th player in NFL history to win multiple MVPs, which kind of puts you on Hall of Fame track. But still no Super Bowl appearance for Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. And I guess we'll start here. What did you think about how he played on Sunday in general?
I think for the most part, he looked pretty good. The big head scratcher was the throw to Isaiah Likely into triple coverage. I know you're DPI hunting there, but that's a throw you shouldn't make. Outside of that, I think he looked pretty good. I think there were a lot of opportunities for him to maybe use his legs more. He was a little more reticent to leave the pocket than he has been. This is a very tired trope about Lamar Jackson this year, right? Like, oh, he's so much better as a pocket passer. Now, I think he's just finally in an offense that allows him to showcase that better. I think he's always been a pretty good pocket passer, but he just was not as inclined to punish them with his legs, seemingly. There were some scramble opportunities he left on the table. Other than that, I don't think Lamar was a huge issue in this game. I think you probably point more to the general offensive game script. They had like -3 runs on the day. They didn't hand it off a single time. That puts strain on anybody, like trying to drop back and go blow for blow with Patrick Mahomes is tough.
I'm gonna say I think the interesting thing for the Ravens is they kind of called the game like they opened up and the game automatically started 21-0. It's how they felt like they were calling it the whole time, which is kind of baffling because like they were never totally out of it by the score. I know, especially in the first half, it felt like, holy crap, Mahomes and Kelsey are on God mode today. It kind of seems like they're going to be so overwhelming that we won't have a chance to get in this unless we start playing like a Big 12 game and fling the ball over the field. But they were down like 17-7 going into half. Defense kicked Mahomes and Kelsey's ass in the second half to the point where they struggled to sustain any drive. So I was just kind of baffled that they just got away from what got them here all season, which is kind of being able to run the ball, even though they switched offensive coordinators from Greg Roman to Todd Monken. Running the ball was still a pretty big strength for this team, and they just never went to it really at all. And by the time, I guess you get late in the game and you kind of need a score, it was a little bit too late. But really weird strategy from the jump. I kind of agree with you that Lamar could have made a little bit more happen with some scrambles, but it's tough. Like when you walk into the game and you're saying, well, Lamar, it's all 100% on you, when it didn't really have to be that way.
Yeah, it didn't have to be that way. I also note that game was a little closer than the final score. Like, you had the Zay Flowers fumble. That game could have easily been like 17-21. People like to pick apart this stuff because when we're talking about conference championship games, it's the NFL. You can always point to one or two things that if they went the other way, the outcome would have been different.
Yeah, and I even on one of the Chiefs scoring drives, I don't remember if it was a touchdown or a field goal, but it was set up by the strip sack that Lamar suffered, like kind of on their own side of the field. So it really does kind of feel like just a huge missed opportunity for the Ravens, because even at the end of that game, I don't really think that the Chiefs are just like markedly better than the Ravens. They just kind of had some off moments. And then when you're playing against Kelsey and Mahomes and Reed and Spags and what they've been able to develop over the past few years, like you can't really have those turnovers, right? Where, especially like the first
if
touchdown.
You hold Mahomes and Travis Kelsey and Andy Reid to 17 points, you need to win the game.
Right. If you were to tell someone before the game, the Chiefs will score 17 points and they won't score a single point in the second half, you would probably think that the Ravens won that game pretty handily. But for whatever reason, they couldn't get in the end zone. They couldn't sustain drives. Really, they had two misfortunate turnovers, like the Zay Flowers one. That was tough, especially because he was right there, and then Snead makes a punch out. So that was also just a terrible sequence for Zay Flowers. The taunting penalty, then he makes the play to regain the yards and get back to the 10-yard line. So I guess you could kind of say he negated that, but then to fumble and then go back to the sideline and be so upset that you cut your hand by hitting something, that's no way to live, Zay. It's the way to live. And I almost felt bad for him by the end of the game, but it's the AFC Championship game. I feel like you got to be a little bit more composed than that.
I don't want to go full boomer sports writer here and be like Zay Flowers is immature, because taunting penalties shouldn't exist. First of all, like I want to see guys trip at one another, but you can't punch the bench or whatever he did.
Can't punch the bench. And then it's funny because he said that someone asked him after the game, like if he had cut his hand on the bench, and he said no, he had a cut before he had a cut on his hand before he hit the bench. I was like, okay, I don't know if that's true or not, but regardless, if you already have a cut on your hand, you probably shouldn't be punching the bench regardless, when your main job is to catch footballs. To me, Zay is like, by the end of the season, he kind of seemed like the only like reliable wideout option that they had. So they still have to address that room. I don't think Odell is going to be back. He was barely playing in that game, and by the end of the season, and then just like Rashad Bateman, Nelson Aguilar, guys who have shown that they're probably replaceable moving forward. So it's going to be a long offseason for the Ravens, man. It's going to be a long offseason for the Ravens. I kind of got to the point where I don't know what would it take for this Chiefs team to lose in the postseason at this point? Kidnap Kelsey, kidnap Mahomes, just wait for everyone to get old and die off?
Well, I'll say this. I've been hedging against the Chiefs all postseason just because outside of Mahomes, this is the worst offense they've had during the Mahomes era. So I've been punting on them this entire postseason run. I've just been like, Mahomes has to go nuclear. But the defense is playing extremely well. I think we all understand by now that Spags has this unit playing extremely good football. They've got some very talented players on that unit. It's tough. I mean, the Ravens had it, man. Like, I don't think the Chiefs are invincible by any means. Like I said, you hold Mahomes to 17 points, you probably feel pretty good about your chances to win the game. But if the defense is playing the way they played against the Ravens and they get a couple turnovers and they hold an MVP quarterback to 7 points, it's tough.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of interesting that Spags has become, this guy, because I remember when he was the head coach of the Rams, and it was just like a total complete joke. I think he went like 11-40 as the head coach there. And I guess people have been asking recently, like, why hasn't Spags gotten any head coaching interviews? And I it's been a long time since he was a head coach of the Rams. But that really went really, really poorly for them. So maybe that's just where he's going to be. He's going to be stuck as a defensive coordinator forever. But hey, he seems to be pretty good at it to me. I mean, the Chiefs defense has steadily gotten better over the past 3 years under his tutelage. Now they've reached like the mountaintop where they're one of the best teams, one of the best defenses in the league. And I think what's really crazy about where they've been is their secondary is so young, and they've kind of turned into one of these units that it's really hard to get open and get free from them. And that was one of the biggest things to me when I was at the game on Sunday, was just how overmatched the Ravens wide receivers were compared to the Chiefs defensive backs a lot of time in terms of getting open, in terms of like just like how the scheme was trying to get open against those guys. Nothing was really working. You got Jerry Sneed, who's set to be a free agent, but he was drafted in 2020. Trent McDuffie, he's a second-year player. He was an all-pro this year from the slot. You got guys like Jalen Watson outside, Joshua Williams is depth, Justin Reed at safety. I mean, it's a young group, but they're playing really good football. And they do, we can like peek ahead a little bit, but they do kind of seem like they have the chops to slow down at least like the 49ers passing game. I think the 49ers will probably commit to the run a little bit harder than Baltimore did on Sunday. But, this is like legit championship caliber defense that they finally have for Mahomes. So, even in like some of the dip in, I guess, scoring output for the Chiefs, because they still move the ball pretty well throughout the season. But now you have a top 3 defense, and it's a level of support Mahomes hasn't had, and it's a level of support, quite frankly, I'm not sure he always needs. But here we are with the greatest quarterback ever having a top flight defense that was just capable enough of shutting down the MVP of the league. So, are you tired of Mahomes, or are you just embracing this as our football overlord?
No, he's our overlord. I would never say anything bad about our overlord. No, I don't need parity to enjoy the NFL necessarily. If good football is being played, then that's really all I care about. And Mahomes plays awesome football. The stuff he does doesn't get tiresome to me at all. I'm more than happy to watch him play for the Super Bowl every year for the next 10 years.
Yeah, we'll see if he has a Tom Brady run in him, but that's always like impossible.
He might end up like becoming a conspiracy theorist, addicted to hallucinogens, getting real into like alternative medicine. Yeah.
I mean, but still, like, I've never seen, I can't even think, well, obviously I can't think Tom Brady, but like Brady was not this guy at 28. Like, he kind of didn't hit the super overlord Tom Brady until, maybe around this time. But Mahomes has been this guy since he stepped on the field. And now what I've been thinking is like, they're totally going to overcorrect a wide receiver, right? And just go balls to the walls. Because like the Mecole Hardman trade, getting him back from the Jets didn't work out. Kadarius Toney bit has not worked out at all. And I think
why do you call it a bit?
Because it is a bit. It is a bit, dude. He's okay. Kadarius Toney's like
That's somebody's father, man.
Is it?
He just had a kid. That's why he was absent from practice this week.
Well, yeah, that's right. And then he got on what, Instagram this weekend and said that he wasn't actually hurt. He was just, I guess, just being benched for whatever reason. Which if that's true and he doesn't have a hip injury, I don't really see why the Chiefs would need to lie about that, because like his play alone merited him not touching the ball anymore or being a part of the game plan at all. It was funny because like you get down to the Ravens game, and it seemed like the only people that were touching the ball at all, Kelsey, Rashid Rice, Pacheco, Mahomes. Outside of that, get out of the way. So the Toney thing, like, yeah, it's a bit like, what does he do? Like, he's not a real receiver. He's like the best player on like a little league field, you know, where, you know, okay, like Toney, you're so athletic. We can just get you the ball somewhere. You can probably bring it to the house, but like catching the ball is really hard for him. Running the right routes is pretty hard for him. Just being where he needs to be and focusing seems to be pretty hard for him, which I can understand and relate to as a fellow, you know, degenerate millennial / Gen Zer on that borderline, but they need something else.
Yeah, especially this might be it for Kelsey, I think.
You think so?
He's slowed down a little bit, man. He had a really good game last Sunday, but he's slowed down a little bit. He's also dating Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
Like, his knees can't be feeling good. Your brother just retired. You're dating Taylor Swift. You're probably going to win another Super Bowl. You might just call it.
You put his knees can't be feeling good like immediately after Taylor Swift the first time, and I just wanted to know what that meant to you.
Oh, okay.
Moving on. Transition. Let's go to the therapy couch, Bryce. The Detroit Lions, your beloved team, they falconed it. And I feel, as someone who's very well versed in falconology, I feel comfortable saying this. They absolutely falconed it. They were up 24-7 against the 49ers, and they ended up losing by a score of 34-31. They had like a half-hearted chance to come back and win at the end of the game. Maybe they botched it. Maybe they didn't. But we have to start again, like with the Lamar discourse. There was huge discourse surrounding this game around Dan Campbell's choices on fourth down. Did you think he was too aggressive during the game? Like, were there some field goals that you would have taken, or did he kind of play this like maybe you thought he should have?
No, I think it's fine. Like, I looked in our fourth down models. We had both those fourth downs as slight goes. If you haven't been watching the Lions all year, just know that their kicker is not to be trusted. He's had some pretty serious issues at distance. So neither of those are automatic. And this just goes back to what I said earlier, which is that in like, does the NFL, the conference championship games, they're usually going to be pretty close games. You can always go back and in hindsight say like, well, if you did this thing different, the outcome would have been different. But there were other plays that were left on the field. I think the fourth down discourse is just something people like talking about. It's like a hot pseudo-intellectual topic that people like to riff on, and
I think it's coping.
You think it's coping? Well, I've seen
coping.
People who aren't Lions fans.
But people want the Lions to win that game really badly. I think it's national cope is what it is more than anything. Like, oh man, why don't you take those 3 free points? Like, as you said, are not necessarily free, you know? I thought like there were other moments in the game that were bigger than that. Like the Ayuk catch, what the hell, dog? Like it hit Vendor right in the face mask. Ayuk caught it. That set them up for a touchdown. And then the Jahmyr Gibbs fumble that set them up on like the 30-yard line, and they scored a touchdown to tie the game. Like, I don't know. To me, it just feels like maybe this is just my superstitious, burned Falcons fan brain coming in. Sometimes God just doesn't favor you. And sometimes I think that's just kind of what happened to the Detroit Lions. You had a chance. You're up 24-7 against a better team on the road, and they just kind of blew it. But I think the fourth down discourse to me, especially how hard people are rooting for the Lions, it just feels like cope when you're not actually taking the other circumstances into play here. Like, the kicker is not that good. He could have easily missed those kicks. And then what? Then are you crying to go for it? I just don't want Dan Campbell.
If they kick that and the kicker shanks it, then people are going to be like, well, Dan Campbell got here by being aggressive all year. And he totally deviated from what his identity is.
And also, like, another thing with the fourth down discourse is, like, at what point in the second half did anyone feel like the Lions defense is going to get a stop on the 49ers? Like, I feel like, I know that they were set up with some good field position a couple of times, but still, they were absolutely mowing through the Lions defense in the second half to the point where maybe you do need to start going for it because you don't really have a chance to kind of get a stop on the back end. It just felt weak and revisionist, the piling on Dan Campbell. And I don't want him to change because I like watching that style of football. I like it when the real players are involved in high leverage situations. I think it's something that we should get more of, and it's a fun treat. I understand why people were saying kick the field goals. He actually did at one point when people were claiming for him to go for it, like right before halftime when they were up 21-7 and he kicked it to go up 24-7. So it's not like he went just super gassed out, balls to the wall the entire game. I don't know. I felt bad for Dan in that circumstance because what got you here didn't quite work. And now all the people who have no introspection or will take any other data into account are just saying you are a buffoon and a moron.
That's the job, baby.
Pays well. If you can get it.
It pays great. Yeah.
I would do it. So what?
You wouldn't do it for very long, but
no, I'd probably quit after like 2 years.
Oh, you think you would be allowed to quit?
Well, yeah, I'd probably be fired.
They wouldn't force you to quit. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a good question. How long would you last as an NFL head coach? I would give myself. Yeah, I think I'll get fired after like 3 or 4 games.
The assistants and the players would be like, "This guy has no idea what he's doing."
3 or 4 games, I think, is about the furthest that I could make it.
Might have a heart attack before then. But anyway, back to the game. The other thing is, I said last week, talking to Keegan on the Off the Charts podcast, Brock Purdy will throw you the ball, and you have to catch it. That burned the Packers too. Brock Purdy threw 3 picks directly at Lions defenders. One was caught. Cam Sutton dropped one, and Kendall Vildor dropped one. And that's even bigger than the fourth down stuff to me.
I think so too. Like it was just missed opportunities. Like as great as Brock Purdy's like season was from a statistical standpoint, when you watch him, there's chances to like pull the game away from the 49ers. I mean, last week against the Packers, that should have been like a disaster class game for Brock Purdy. He had the game against the Ravens where they finally held on and made some plays and pressured him in the bad spots. But it's just wild to me to see that a guy that will give defenses this many chances to come away with the ball, it doesn't really hurt him at the end of the day. It's like divine intervention sometimes almost. Like,
yeah,
I don't think he's played well in the playoffs really at all.
No, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but all season long, his turnover-worthy throw rate was terrible. He has a bunch of dropped interceptions in our charting, and he's just gotten away with quite a bit. But I think people, like the Mr. Irrelevant thing, people really badly want Kyle Shanahan to have a good quarterback.
I do too.
They want to. I agree. Like they have like this thought experiment in their heads of what would Kyle Shanahan do if he had like a truly elite quarterback. And so I think between that and the whole Mr. Irrelevant Cinderella story thing, people are hyping Purdy up to be something that he's not.
Yeah. I mean, they had a chance to get a guy like that in 2017 when Kyle was first hired, and they went with Solomon Thomas over Mahomes or the guy in Cleveland. So, which maybe that was the right decision for them.
That was that last one was, yeah.
the last one, it's hard to blame him on too much.
Does he know?
What did he know? What did he know going into the future to know that hey, in 4 years we're gonna look really smart for not taking Deshaun Watson at the second pick in the draft? So yeah, we'll see what happens in the Super Bowl. I just can't believe like the amount of luck that, and I don't even want to sound like I'm hating here, because I'd like to see the 49ers in the Super Bowl. I'd like to see all the star players they have play for a chip, but like they've been pretty lucky on offense in terms of just not having some of these turnovers be a little bit more dastardly than they are. The last question I have for you, as far as like fourth down stuff is concerned, Mike Florio was basically saying, and not just Florio, a lot of people say that, you know, the fourth down decisions don't take into account of anything else that's going on in the field. It's just to go for it, which to me just seems like you have taken no time to try and understand what any of this actually is. But for someone who actually works in data, how many factors like actually go into, and I know there are different models for fourth down stuff, but how many, you know, factors go into whether you should go or not, or should there be more human intervention involved in some of these decisions?
Well, team strength is absolutely a factor in any good fourth down model. We have a team agnostic one that would just give a general recommendation, and then we also have team specific ones. Now, the blind spots would be like a guy gets injured during the game, like your starting quarterback busts his thumb up and he's on the sideline. Like it won't be updated in real time like that, but as a general rule, team strength is considered.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that people will be like, oh, well, then, you know, if your circumstances are changing, do you still be a slave to the analytics? I was like, dude, use your brain. Just use your brain at that point. It's not like someone's holding you at, or like some nerd's holding you at a gunpoint saying you have to go for it here. Like I don't know, the idea that these people are just doing this with no thought no thought allowed as far as like the extenuating circumstances behind any decision, whether it be fourth down or 2-point or what have you. Like, do you think these people are just not taking any account into where their team actually is, and they're just going by the numbers implicitly? It's just weird that
it's also very funny that Dan Campbell is the subject of this particular discussion, because Dan Campbell is very much like I believe in my guys and I'm going to let them. That's not like a classic analytical thought, right? It's like, I believe in my guys and we're going to will it to be. And Dan Campbell is not like, he's a smart coach, but he's not a nerd. Like this is he played tight end in the NFL. He's like 6'4", 250 pounds. He shoved those people into lockers growing up. Like,
yeah, I just think the analytics doesn't capture everything. Crowd is just like, no, I don't think anyone would disagree with you on that. That's why you have to use your brain and your eyes. And I think a lot of teams, and they find themselves in a situation, they do use their brains and their eyes, and it's just all results based. It's all results based complaining. Like, if you make it, you're a genius. If you miss it, you're a damn idiot. And there's no room for kind of even just saying, well, sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't. Them's the breaks, and that's why it's a fun game, because the stakes are high. You get put in high leverage situations all the time, and you're forced to make gut checks. And I don't really feel the need to just complain all day about what someone should or should not have done.
Well, I'll say one more thing, and then we can move on to whatever you want to move on to. There's also selection bias in this, because people don't see when coaches override what a model will say. They only see when they listen to the model and they go for it. Because there are a lot more game situations than the average person might think that would tell you to go for it, and you'd be like, that's completely crazy. Some models will tell you, like, if it's 4th and 2 on your own 38-yard line in the second quarter and you're up 7, you go for it. And you don't see teams doing that a lot, but there are definitely situations where if coaches went for it at the behest of their fourth down model, that people would think they're absolutely lunatics, but they don't make those decisions, so we don't see it.
Right.
So these coaches are not just blindly listening to numbers. It's not a thing.
Right. It's not a thing. And it's just a weird critique to me, especially guys who have played in the NFL. Like, it's not some blind thing. Like everything's taken into account, including how things are actually going on the field and how things feel in the field. Sometimes you just don't get it. And that is what it is. It's fine. So for you, the Lions have had this heartbreaking defeat. Things are going to change. I want to ask you, as also the biggest Jared Goff fan in the world, what's next for the Lions, and how do you feel about them about to hand him, a pretty sizable contract that will lock him in as a quarterback for the next few seasons?
I think it puts a cap on what you can do. I would make fun of Jared Goff a lot. He's fine. He has gotten better during his time in Detroit. He's ultimately not like a win because of guy. He's probably like a top 12 quarterback, which is fine. But we've seen the quarterback market, and that sort of ties your hands a little bit. But they also don't want you don't want to end up in quarterback purgatory. That's a very scary thing. It's not like they have the second overall pick and can go out and replace him with somebody. It's tough. Ideally, you would want to upgrade that position, I would think, but they seem to, at least publicly, they seem to be big believers in him. So I'm sure they'll give him a deal, but it doesn't feel great.
Yeah, I feel like you can watch Goff and understand that he's a good cog to this offense and has helped them. But man, this is why last year I think not just me, but a lot of people thought, hey, you have a chance to really go out and kind of blow the roof open on this thing with maybe trading up for a quarterback and seeing how that goes. They decided to sit and win now mode, and we're going to see the merits of that really quickly over the next couple of years, because the Lions are about to suffer the curse of competency, right? Where you've drafted well, really well, since Brad Holmes has been hired as the general manager, and now
I saw the other day some idiot gave the Lions draft last year an F.
I don't know. Well, I'll be vindicated when they're
L plus ratio plus bozo plus you get paid to do this, LMAO plus clown emoji.
Hey, I've already atoned for my sins on the Lions draft. I think it's funny that Lions fans think I care about giving them a bad draft grade. I don't think about it like ever. I don't even care when it's posted on the internet.
Doesn't keep you up at night?
No, it really doesn't. In fact, I almost never think about it at all entirely. I didn't even know I got Old Tasty.
It must be very nice not to be kept up at night by the Lions.
Yeah, I know. Well, I have my own demons that I'm fighting with, including trying to convince myself that Jimmy Lake is a great hire for defensive coordinator for the Falcons. So those are more the demons that I'm suffering with right now, instead of whatever, Lion-based rage that doesn't really fall in my lap ever. And I'm thinking about doing a bit where I just give the Lions an F every single year. What do you think about that?
I think it'd be funny. It'd make a lot of people mad.
It would make a lot of people mad. So I think we should just keep going with it. No matter who they draft, they could get Caleb Williams could fall to the bottom of the first round and draft.
Okay, let's not. No.
Caleb Williams, Jared Goff is fine, but Caleb Williams is stretched too far.
Hey, they're in win now. They need a guy that can play quarterback at the NFL level for the next 2-3 years. You've committed to this strategy. You can't take a developmental guy.
Yeah, now that's a good bit right there. Or is it a bit?
I mean, we're not here to talk about Caleb Williams, but I would not want to be the GM that stakes my career and the ability to put food on my family's table like Caleb Williams.
Yeah, so that's another podcast for another day. I'm going to throw an ad break real quick. We'll come out on the other side and finish this up with a little bit of talk on the head coaching hires. All right, we're back. Final sprint of this week's Exempt List. We have some breaking news, Bryce. We have some breaking news right now.
Dude, is this a bit?
No, this is not a bit. The Steelers have made an offensive coordinator hire. They've hired Arthur Smith to be their offensive coordinator.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you a Steelers fan now? Are you following him to Pittsburgh?
No, there's no shot. Maybe if they didn't have Kenny Pickett. or if they had any quarterback with a pulse, I would be a little bit interested in this. But no. Do you have any thoughts on Arthur Smith? I mean, I just thought he got so much worse at calling plays this year, and the offensive line took a step back. They were just playing guppy ball all year. I don't really know how else to describe it. The Falcons were.
He was legitimately a good offensive coordinator with Tennessee. I think you obviously follow the Falcons much more closely than I do, but it felt like over the last year or so, he just, maybe the media chatter annoyed him, but it just felt like he was really stubborn and started doing stuff like almost despite what people were saying. Because like all the fantasy pilled degenerates were like, never, ever, ever lets Kyle Pitts do anything. And like, yeah, maybe he could have been more optimal in his personnel decisions, but it felt like he regressed in that regard towards the end of his tenure. And
yeah, I feel the same way, especially like with some of the run game concepts when they were calling them. I ultimately think what got him fired was outside of losing like some of those really games he should have won against some pretty bad teams. I think like you should never be Arthur Smith and have like a bottom 6 run game in terms of efficiency. It's like, why are you here at this point? And also,
they were worse than they were last year. And
they were significantly worse.
Robinson,
significantly worse.
No good.
Like they went from like by EPA standards, like a top 10 offense to one of the worst offenses in the league. So that was pretty baffling to me. There were way too many games where like, and I understand maybe like if you look over the whole season, some of the route or how often they're throwing to guys based on how often they threw the ball in general wasn't all that bad compared to other top guys. But like there's a lot of games where Drake London will have like 1, 2, 3 targets. Like, come on, Arthur. Like we gotta. To a degree, yeah. The fancy people are annoying as hell with how they broke. They're evil. Yeah,
these people
evil
do not
people.
Have goodness in their hearts
with how they broke down that offense. But it also would help you in real life for Drake London to touch the ball a little bit more than he did, or for Kyle Pitts to be a little bit more intentional with his targets. I think there's a happy medium with how you can do that because, dude, like Kadarrell Hodge targets, it's no offense to him, it's not doing anything for you. You had a bunch of wide receiver 3s next to your wide receiver 1. Maybe you should throw us here wide receiver 1 a little bit more. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. So
quarterback is definitely a function of that too, but
yes. And the Steelers, they have Kenny Pickett, who they appear dead set on having on the team next year, and Mason Rudolph has probably played his way back into returning. So
Mike should be a good battle in camp between those two.
Yeah. Well, hopefully Mike Tomlin just realizes that they have made a mistake here with the Kenny Pickett selection, and you move on and everything's okay. I don't think that's the worst thing in the world, but will the Steelers do it? I have been of the opinion for a long time now that the Steelers and everything around them kind of reminds me of a cult. So I don't really know if they have the cojones to move on from Kenny Pickett, which is a wild, wild thing to say to me. And I don't think their OC hires matters at all.
He's the hometown kid. From New Jersey.
Yeah. They shared the same cafeteria, So that's how you draft your franchise quarterbacks, based on who was eating food occasionally next to Mike Tomlin when Mike Tomlin went to the cafeteria at a weird hour, maybe when he shouldn't have been. Genius
that
stuff.
Was like conspiracy theorist intonation there. Maybe when he shouldn't have been.
Okay. No, I mean, like, sometimes you eat lunch at 2 instead of 12. And then there's Kenny Pickett. So you sit down next to him and you're like, oh, I kind of like this guy. He's not that bad to hang out with.
Man can't have a late lunch now. God forbid that men have lunch.
Not when at least you use drafting Kenny Pickett. No, you can't have a late lunch.
now you're the casual fan that gets mad whenever a player posts like, oh, I took my kid to the park on a Monday after a loss, and they're like, maybe you should be practicing your routes.
Why aren't you watching film? Okay, why aren't you lifting weights? Yeah. Any more thoughts on the lines moving forward before we move into the final piece of this podcast?
The only thing is that I've seen. This is definitely copium. The only thing I've seen is that a lot of Lions fans think they'll be back. which is not a bet I would make. I think it's okay to feel generally good about the team for the next 2-3 years, to be able to play winning football, because that's just not something that's existed in Detroit for decades. But they overachieved this year. They had an easy schedule. They have some serious issues at key positions they need to address. They need to address corner. They need to address linebacker. Amon-Ra St. Brown's going to be a free agent after this next season, so they probably want to add something there if they don't plan on re-signing him. Or if they can't re-sign him, I don't know what their cap situation is, but I don't know that I'd bank on the Lions to make the NFC Championship game next year, but we'll see.
There's more breaking news, Bryce, and this is Detroit Lions related. Ben Johnson is staying on as the offensive coordinator.
Really?
Yes.
That's huge.
Adam Schefter tweeted that Ben Johnson's asking price spooked some teams, and he is returning to Detroit to call plays for another season.
That's big for them.
That is big for them. Where would you have ranked? Like, would Ben Johnson have been someone that you have been going after if you were a team with a head coach opening?
I'll place a disclaimer on this that I am always reticent to talk about how good or bad I think coaching hires are, just because I can watch a player and form an opinion on them based on film. Even that comes with unknowns. Like, sometimes we don't know what their exact assignment was or whatever, but like coaches, it's so much harder just because these guys are ultimately teachers and we don't see how they teach. We only see what the results are. Every hiring cycle, there's some guy that's supposed to be like the next big thing and this is going to be a great hire, and he ends up flaming out in 3 years. The thing I will say about Ben Johnson as a head coaching candidate is that he probably would appeal to me more than some other guys that are like this whiz kid, Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay play caller. He's not like he doesn't necessarily do anything to reinvent the wheel. I think his strength is he's just adapted the offensive system to complement his players really well. Like he does a very good job of enabling what his players do well. Like, for all the criticisms I have about Jared Goff, their passing game is very he lets them do some things in the passing game that other teams don't do as much of. Ben Johnson just spams it, like all the crazy looking run game stuff they do with the pulling Frank Ragnow and Penei Sewell. Like, some other offensive coordinators might not do that as much. So I think he's very good at limit testing, so to speak, and allowing his players to do the things they're best at, as opposed to being like this genius savant guy who has the perfect play call in every situation.
Is that a shot at Arthur Smith? We just talked about him?
No.
Did I just make it
I don't really think about Arthur Smith like that.
Okay. There's your breaking news take. Wow, this is interesting. The past two podcasts I've been on, because last week I was on with Jason Fitz when the Raheem Morris hire got announced, and now I'm on with you when the Ben Johnson staying thing gets announced. Look, this is amazing. Aren't you so happy?
Great timing.
I wanted to ask you something real quick about just the idea of hiring offensive coaches versus defensive coaches, and basically the way that we talk about it. Because over the past few years, there have been times where people would be just throwing up at the idea of hiring a defensive coordinator because, oh my God, what if we have a hotshot offensive play caller and he doesn't want to leave, or he leaves, and now we're just stuck with nobody. We should have promoted that guy, blah, 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 blah. I don't think the NFL is really buying into that anymore based on the hires that we've gotten in this cycle, especially with the Falcons hiring Raheem Morris, Mike McDonald's about to get a job, Dan Quinn's still in the running for jobs. It seems like, some of these defensive coaches are getting more of a fair shot in terms of, their ability to interview for these head coaching jobs. Do you think it matters really what side of the ball you hire, or do we get too kind of caught up in that over the past few years?
I have no empirical data to back this up, but I think there probably is a trend of teams firing an offensive guy and then hiring a defensive guy and vice versa. I'm not sure it really matters as much because, again, fascinated with this archetype of like a whiz kid offensive guru becoming the head coach and calling the plays. But I think as long as a guy can run a team, that's more important necessarily than what side of the ball he's on. There are great coaches to come from both sides of the ball. So I think what's more important is the person rather than their area of expertise. I know that's a super galaxy brain, very smart thing to say, but
yeah, and I think what you said before is pretty apt in terms of it's pretty hard to like just judge head coaching hires, and to a much larger degree. Like I always thought it was funny when people would get excited about like a general manager hire. Like, you like, what do you know about this person? Like, oh, this person's definitely going to be the guy. Really, what do you know about him? Like, what role did they actually have in terms of picking the other team or their previous team's players and signing free agents and the scout and all that stuff? You really are excited about Joe Blow being your new general manager, but at least with a head coach's hire, you can kind of look at like data and film just to see get an idea of what they had going on that side of the ball. But in general, like and this is probably me being like burned on the Arthur Smith stuff because I thought that was going to be a good hire that worked out for them. But I just don't really know how you can have really any confidence in like either way in terms of how things are going to shape out. You kind of just got to wait and see what happens. Like I know people have come out of really voluntarily come out and said the Falcons nailed it with Raheem Morris, going from like Mike Tomlin, Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, the Rams front office in general, people saying that they nailed it. Jalen Ramsey said he's the best coach in the NFL. But I don't know what's going to happen until things actually start to take form. So this is not me trying to avoid being old takes exposed again. That really had no effect on my life whatsoever. I didn't even know it happened. I still haven't seen the post itself. But I don't know. I just don't really have any need to kind of project what could possibly happen with a head coaching hire. There's so many different factors. And I think as we've seen recently, a lot of it comes by your ability to just find stable quarterback play or somewhat stable quarterback play. So if you don't have it, you're probably going to get fired. If you do have it, you're still probably going to get fired, but maybe like plus 2 years after that. That's really all I got on the head coaching stuff. But still, rapid fire, before we get out of here, what's your favorite hire so far of the cycle?
I guess it's probably Harbaugh. That seems like a really good marriage with him and Herbert. And it's also, again, this is very smart and brave of me, but Harbaugh also has a track record as a head coach.
Yeah.
So it's easier to say, I think the guy who's been to the Super Bowl and who's won national championships is going to be a good head coach. Very bold. Outside of that, like that's the gimme, right? Outside of that, it's probably Dave Canales. You need to try and guppy Bryce Young. He's had 2 good years back-to-back working with Baker Mayfield and Geno Smith. So I think, again, it's hard to know what he'll be like as a head coach, but I think having a guy who's shown he can work with guys that are sort of in a weird spot in their careers is, at the very least, from Carolina brass perspective, like self-aware of where you are now. That said, they'll probably fire him in like week 6 or something after a bad loss because Tepper's mad. But
look, for where the Panthers were, Canales is probably about as good as a candidate they could get. Because I mean, there were reports during the season, like back in like October, November, where Ben Johnson's camp was leaking like, "Hey, Tepper, if you want me, it's going to be $25 million per season," which would. I know we don't have a whole lot of info or public info on like head coaching contracts, but that would make him by far the most expensive coach in the league. I guess that's probably what deterred Tepper and I guess other teams. But for where the Panthers are, probably don't have a quarterback, don't have a first-round pick this year, which will have been the first pick of the draft. You're not like as cap healthy as teams who usually find themselves in this spot where they're trying to add pieces around a quarterback. Canales could have done a lot worse, I feel like, than the guy with this profile. I don't know if it works out, but you have to commit to it for at least like 2 years, you would think, because he got a 6-year contract. And Tepper is already paying.
I don't think that matters to Tepper.
No, probably doesn't matter.
And this is what he's fired 6 coaches.
Well, he fired Rivera, which was like a leftover when he got there. He's fired Matt Rule, who was 2.5 years into or maybe 2 years, or a year and a half, excuse me, to like a 7-year deal. Then Frank Reich, who didn't even make it through 1 year. And now Dave Canales, who has a 6-year deal. So he's paying 3 coaches right now with Rule, Reich, and now Canales. So can you imagine having that much money? I actually can't fathom what it'd be like to know that you can just burn. No, yeah, for sure. Know that you can just burn hundreds of $1 million trying to find a head coach for your football team. I know some Panthers fans are turned off by the idea that Canales didn't get any other interviews. I'm not really sure how much that matters. We'll find out. We'll find out very soon how much that matters. And I also am interested to see if Canales keeps posting on Twitter if the Panthers do get off to a pretty bad start this year. Anything that you're working on, you want to let people know about? SIS stuff that's cool coming down the pipeline?
We do the draft site for 3013. We just did our first round of reports on like the top 100 guys, so you can find that on their site, 3013.com. Stuff that I'm working on, a lot of it is more research-driven stuff, so I won't get too much into that. We do have a pretty cool film room product that we're working on. I don't know if I'm supposed to talk about that or not, but I just did.
Yeah.
We're hoping to have that done pretty soon.
All right. Thanks, Bryce, for stopping by on the Exempt List. Send us a voicemail. You can send it to speakpipe.com/zeroblitz. Ask a question, hottest take. You know the deal. Read it on the show. We'll be back with another episode of the Exempt List next Tuesday from Las Vegas. We're working on a guest for that now, but should be a good time. I am Charles McDonald. You can find me on Twitter @4verts. Bryce is @BT Rossler. And our producer is Stone Rochelle. And on Twitter @SJ Rochelle. And we will see you next week.